Thank you for joining me. My name is Nadine, and I'm the Special Collections Librarian. In part one of this three-part series, we're going to learn about the Puerto Rican print collection at the Newark Public Library. For those of you who may not know, the Special Collections Division of the Newark Public Library contains thousands of works on paper. So we have a collection of engravings, etchings, lithographs, screen prints, and we also have a rare book collection and other works on paper, such as shopping bags, calendars, greeting cards, photographs, and drawings, and much more, and artist books. The print collection was created over a century ago. In the beginning, we purchased prints by European and American artists, and soon after, in the 1920s, we began collecting artwork from Japan because it was very different from the pieces that we were collecting. Artwork was acquired in order to teach New Yorkers about different cultures as well as techniques. These works were often exhibited so that New Yorkers can view different kinds of art and learn about them. If you check out our YouTube page, you'll find an overview of the art collection which explains how and why the Newark Public Library contains thousands of fine prints. So why is there such an enormous collection of artwork here in Newark? In the late 20th century, the library began collecting more contemporary art, and in the early 1970s, we proceeded to acquire beautiful works of art, including original prints, signed posters, and special books by artists and writers from Puerto Rico. Today, the library has a collection of several hundred fine prints and signed posters by artists such as Lorenzo Omar, Rafael Tufino, Jose Rosa, Roberto Moya, Antonio Martorell, Jose Alicea, Luis Cajiga, Mirna Baez, Nelson Sambolin, and others who made Puerto Rico one of the most important countries in graphic arts in the mid-20th century. Omar and Tufino are considered masters of Puerto Rico's innovative and prolific 50s generation. The library has exhibited these works in local galleries and has loaned them to Rutgers University, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and other venues. In 2017, a few were loaned to the Township of Union, where they were displayed in the municipal building. How did we amass such a collection? It's because William Dane, who was the former keeper of the prints at the Newark Public Library, he retired in 2009. He had enjoyed traveling to Puerto Rico annually. During his visits, he explored museums and galleries and became captivated by the artwork that he saw. In 1990, William Dane said, "I saw wonderful graphics there, and I realized there was something wonderful going on. Their quality and graphic techniques were superb." Dane purchased most of the screen prints at the Galeria Palomas in San Juan during the 1970s and 1980s. He established a great relationship with the gallery, and there is much communication in our files, which shows what was being purchased. During this time, many of these artists were not known outside of Puerto Rico. So what exactly is a screen print? Screen printing is a process where ink is forced through a mesh screen onto a surface, making certain areas of a screen impervious to printing ink. This creates a stencil which blocks the printing ink from passing through the screen. The ink that passes through the screen forms the printed image. A printing screen consists of a fine mesh fabric that is tightly stretched and attached to a metal or a wood frame. Traditionally, these screens were made of silk. If you ever want to try it yourself, I encourage you to contact the Newark Print Shop here in Newark, New Jersey, because they offer classes and you can produce your own silk screened work of art. This could be on a t-shirt or a poster or on a piece of paper. The process allows an artist to make multiple copies of a work. Almost all in our collection are numbered by the artist. For example, sometimes 200 prints of a certain work were made. So even though there might be more than one copy, these were not mass printed and they still remain very unique. Other institutions began collecting art from Puerto Rico, and today, Princeton University, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York have significant holdings. Poster making in Puerto Rico can be traced to the late 1940s. When the poster movement originated, they were produced in order to promote health and social programs and also films which were made in Puerto Rico. They were used as a means of communication in order to educate and to convey information about art, literature, politics, and social events. Here it is an example of a poster made for DVEDCO, which is the Division of Community Education, by artist Jose Melendez Contreras. In part 3 of the series, I will highlight additional examples of DVEDCO posters from the library's collection. Many artists from Puerto Rico are represented in our collection. The prints are often expressive and many contain thought-provoking messages. The artists often depict symbols and images important to Puerto Rico, such as painted saint figures, costumes, musical instruments, and animals such as the rooster. You'll see some examples during this presentation. Also pay attention to the typography. Lettering was also integrated into the design, so a political poster will have a different type than one publicizing a ballet. So for example, if there's a poster created for a musical performance, you may notice that the lettering may appear to be moving or dancing. So this changes depending on the subject of the poster. Please note that we began this series on this day, September 23rd, because it is the anniversary of the 1868 Grito de Lares, or Lares Rebellion, which was the first major revolt against Spanish rule in Puerto Rico. In order to more fully understand some of the messages and impetus for these works, let's go over a brief history of the island. After Christopher Columbus arrived on the island, it was subsequently colonized by Spain and remained under Spain's possession for 400 years. The island had been inhabited by the indigenous Taino people who were decimated as a result of European diseases, forced labor, and the exploitation that came with colonization. Much occurred during the 4 centuries, which impacted Puerto Rico's culture and demographics. The United States invaded Puerto Rico during the Spanish-American War in 1898, and Spain ceded control of the island to the U.S. following the war. Today, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, and the people of Puerto Rico have been U.S. citizens since 1917. However, since Puerto Rico is not a state, its residents cannot vote in U.S. elections. Sometimes you may hear Puerto Rico called Borinquen. This is a derivation of Borican, its original Taino name. And here is another work in our collection by one of Puerto Rico's most well-known artists, Lorenzo Omar. The Grito de Lares commemorated Puerto Rico's cry for independence. On September 23, 1868, a large group of poorly armed Puerto Rican men revolted for independence from Spain. On the evening of the 23rd, the group was able to take the town of Lares because the Spaniards were unaware of the revolt and were not prepared for the men. The group proceeded to form a provisional government declaring an independent Puerto Rican republic. The following day, they marched to San Sebastian, where the Spanish militia was waiting for them. The men had been planning this rebellion for about 12 years, and they were quickly defeated by the Spanish government. Some escaped, a few died during the event, and others were tried and sent to jail, where several died from yellow fever. 4 months later, Spain declared a general amnesty. The reasons for the insurrection were poverty, slavery, taxation, lack of opportunity, and military rule. In 1969, Governor Luis Aferré, a statehood supporter, declared September 23rd a national holiday. Lares was declared a historic site by the Institute of Puerto Rican Culture. Lares is known as the birthplace of Puerto Rican nationalism. Additionally, I would like to note that National Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th through October 15th. Please check the library's website for a calendar of virtual programs and more information about the library's annual Latino celebration. Artists also created posters for one another. Here is an example of a poster made by Nelson Sambolin to publicize an exhibit of works by fellow artist Rafael Rivera Rosa. And here is a poster Lorenzo Omar created for artist Mirna Baez, whose work we also have in our collection. Here is another work, also by Lorenzo Omar, advertising an exhibit of the works of Jose Alicea. And Manuel Hernandez Acevedo worked under Lorenzo Omar and Rafael Tufino at the Division of Community Education in San Juan. Many artists, such as Acevedo, learned from masters such as Omar in these workshops. Throughout these segments, you will hear many references to Lorenzo Omar. That is because the library is fortunate to have many of his works, and we have more prints by Omar than any other artist from Puerto Rico. This will be explained further on in part 3 of this series. Omar was both an artist and a teacher, but while he was studying drawing, he paid for his schooling by working as an acrobat and later as a jewelry designer at Cartier. By showing you examples of his works, I hope you will be able to appreciate his graphic techniques and the quality of his work. Some of his works feature intricate calligraphy, and others, such as this one promoting the Pan American Games in Puerto Rico in 1979, are stylistically different from some of the ones that you have seen already. So for example, if you look at this print by Omar, you will see how dissimilar it is from the one that we just looked at. Not only because it lacks color, but primarily for its calligraphy and its portraiture. This one is also a screen print. Many prints contain imagery which is culturally important to Puerto Rico, such as roosters and saints, which are depicted in this work by Jose Alicea. Cockfighting has been practiced for 400 years in Puerto Rico and is considered an integral part of the island's folklore. Though it's a controversial sport, cockfighting is so much part of the island's culture that many artesanos, craftsmen, and artists create pieces inspired by or depicting elements of cockfighting. The carving of small wooden santos, saints, is one of the traditional crafts of Puerto Rico. The santeros, or saint makers, traced their craft to the 16th century. The small, compact figures were created by self-taught rural carvers whose figures were objects of devotion as manifestations of the saint's spirit. Today's carvers represent a link to Puerto Rico's past and are valued as living symbols of the island's cultural heritage. Other times, artists collaborated. Here is a portfolio that we own that was created by Omar and Rafael Tufino, who you will learn about in the next segment. Plena is a style of Puerto Rican music with a highly syncopated rhythm and often satirical lyrics. Plena was born in the working-class barrios in Puerto Rico and was known as El Periódico Cantado, a kind of live musical newspaper, because its lyrics narrated stories about the pains and ironies of people's everyday life, commented on major news events of the day, such as Elena was stabbed, a bishop is visiting the island, a hurricane is coming, or often satirized local politicians or scandals. This publication contains 12 signed prints. Each print illustrates a Puerto Rican folk song, including the score and the words. The prints are separate and folded with a line-cut vignette on the verso of each. These songs are transcribed on a separate sheet on the back. So here we see on the left is the colorful cover of the Plena's portfolio. On the upper right is the song, so you see the words and the music and the image in the background. That's just one of the several that's included in the portfolio. And on the bottom is the title page that is signed by both of the artists on the top. Thank you for joining me today. In part 2 of this series, we will view many more striking examples of works from the library's collection, which were created by talented artists including Lorenzo Omar, Antonio Martorell, Nelson Sambolin, Jose Alicea, Rafael Tufino, Jose Rosa, and others. We'll learn about the artists, and you will have a chance to look at the variety of colorful and expressive images. Subsequently, in part three, we will conclude by taking a look at some of the posters that were created for the Division of Community Education. And then I'll also mention some noteworthy donations that were made to the collection. Please make sure to tune in for the next two parts of this program. If you have any questions or comments, please do email specialcollections@npl.org. And I look forward to the next two segments, and I hope you will join us for those. Thank you and take care.